is some curiosity about our perspectives and maybe they're looking for some answers. So you young men have some questions for me, I guess,
Yes,
and for all of us, Mr. Martinez and Ms. Hickey.
Okay, so the first question that we have for you is from our Facebook page. We
Can you
noticed
speak
that,
up a little bit?
from our Facebook page, we noticed that you identify yourself as a conservative. And do you have any specific political party affiliations?
Yeah, well, I'm a registered Republican, and I hold fast to the tenets of the party's platform. I wish they did.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Probably try to center this, David. Make sure we're all in this so we can have all
right.
the faces.
this is. Do you generally agree with President Trump's ideas? You're a registered Republican.
Yeah, for the most part, yes. I'm a strict constitutionalist, and my whole perspective is that we're a nation of laws and they need to be followed. And the problem is that is a moving target to some people, and it's not open to interpretation. Laws are laws, and they're to be strictly adhered to and followed. And if you don't follow them, then we become a nation of lawlessness, and that's where we are right now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We're lawless.
Okay. And then what? So why did you actually decide to run for the position?
For the 39th?
Yes.
Well, you have to look at who we've had there. We've had Ed Royce there for decades, and Ed Royce is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, which is an international entity that has no respect for sovereignty, but in fact a globalist agenda of subjecting the United States to the whims of a cabal that lives off of a military-industrial complex imperialism form of existence by subjugating nations through financial debt slavery, and then they pillage their resources and enslave the population. And that's how Mr. Royce has decided to run his 30 years in the House of Representatives, by pursuing a career that protects that entire machine. It's criminal, because we've had millions of people die. We've had millions of people have their lives reduced to abject poverty, and just in the name of keeping the United States and its allies at the front and center of the control button. It's so immoral and criminal, it's unbelievable.
Okay. So let's go aside from the House of Representatives thing, and we were a question that a student had from Troy was when and why did you become involved with local politics?
Well, I'll tell you how it all started. When I was young, a little younger than you guys, I used to go fishing all the time, go to the beach all the time. I used to ride my bike down to Newport, and I worked on the fishing boats, I fished on the piers, and enjoyed my time at the beach with free access to the coast. And then they tried to kick the fishermen off the pier and take the parking out and make public access an impossibility down there. And I realized how corrupt and how disingenuous and how deceptive public officials were in their dealings with the regular person like you and I. And so what I uncovered at the time, this was about 25 years ago, that there was a plan to put high-rise apartment buildings all along the Balboa Peninsula, and they were going to take out all the parking, and they tried to ban fishing, which is a Constitution-protected activity. I mean, I don't know where you're from or your parents are from, but my folks aren't from here. My dad was from Italy, my mom's family was from Ireland, and they had gone through famines, and the right to feed yourself is an inherent right. And what was happening growing up at the piers, there were a lot of farm workers. That's how they got their protein. There wasn't a food stamp program for undocumented workers. They had access to tomatoes and cucumbers, but they did not have access to fish or protein. So when I was a child, believe it or not, you could go to these piers and you could catch 1,000 fish in a day if you had the right tackle, and these people were filling buckets to bring back to their families on the farms. So when I saw a direct attack on people's right to feed themselves by how a small but powerful group of people were trying to take over access to a food supply, I could not believe what I was seeing. And then when I started digging in and getting involved into the legalities of what was trying to be proposed by the municipality at the city of Newport Beach, and how crooked and illegal it was, it not only infuriated me, but it made me realize, hey, these guys are playing games with people that they underestimate, and they all have Achilles' heels in their corrupt deals. And I started finding out a way to purposely stick my neck out for the little guy. Because to be honest with you, these little guys I don't know if you realize this, but back in 1979, a can of macadamia nuts cost about $6. And these Filipinos and these Hispanic farm workers would bring me these cans of macadamia nuts when I was 12 years old. It would cost them a day's wages because I would give them a bucket full of fish. And that moved me to realize just how important it was for people to stand up for people that don't have a voice. So that's how I got involved in politics. It was a very young age.
So you've been doing this for a while?
Yeah, I've been an activist for over 25 years.
Okay, our next question for you. What will your agenda be as a representative?
The 39th District Congress has a duty to its people, and that is basically the congressional representatives, they hold the purse strings. They control what the money's supposed to be spent on. And they also make laws at the federal level. Now, if you can imagine how big the federal budget is, and how big their responsibility is to the protection of domestic security and the well-being and welfare of the citizens, look at what the federal government's involved in right now. The first thing I would do is get us out of the Federal Reserve. I don't know if you people understand what's happening right now with how our currency is issued, but the money supply that we have is basically printed out of thin air by a private bank and then loaned at interest to the government. And then that money is loaned at interest to the banks. And that money is loaned at interest to the people. And that money is loaned at interest from the people to other people. Now, what happens when you monetize paper and you put everybody into debt, you begin a process of foreclosure on everything. Because you cannot pay it back unless you exchange that created debt that's nothing more than paper for commodities such as real estate, labor, raw materials, natural resources. So what's happened is you've got somebody that shows up with a printing press that doesn't need a gun. They get to take the forest, the oil, the minerals, the housing, the human beings' labor, and all the productivity. So we've got to get out of the Federal Reserve. And most people, because of what these schools teach the kids, do not understand our system of monetary issuance. They do not understand where our money comes from. They do not understand the difference between a Federal Reserve note and a United States note. It's debt. You can't have a monetary system based on ever-expanding debt. It has to be based on some form of physical collateral. So that would be the first thing I would do, is get us out of the Federal Reserve. At least attempt or try to get that ball rolling. The problem is the last time we tried to do that was, I believe, Reagan. He got a bullet to the head. And before that, anybody that had a legitimate attempt at it was Kennedy. He got a bullet to the head. And even Lincoln tried to do it, and he got a bullet to the head. So it's a very powerful cabal that is making sure this monetary system continues. And it needs to be ended.
Okay. So many parents of Troy High School, let's talk about the Wi-Fi. Many parents of Troy High School wanted the implementations of Chromebooks and Wi-Fis because they wanted to modernize the education system. If you were to be successful in banning Wi-Fi, how would you modernize Troy's education and align it with today's careers?
Sure. Well, first of all, let's talk about what's going on inside Troy High School. First of all, Troy High School has metal walls. There's sheet metal walls. I don't know if you guys know that.
Yeah, I tend to.
We know that microwaves inside metal walls is a bad combination. When you bounce things around inside a metal chamber, you have all kinds of bizarre amplifications and changes to the waves and the energy levels and the directed source of the energy levels. So that's a problem. But there are ways to establish communication with devices. For example, there is something called Li-Fi. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this, but it's data transmission through light energy. Now, when I was in 5th grade, I won the science fair project because one of the things that I had studied was the fiber optic cables, and this was really kind of new and cutting edge back in the 70s. This was like in 1975 or 1976. And I was fascinated by it because you could transmit a ton of data through this little teeny cable through light energy. Well, the same thing can be accomplished in the classroom. If you wanted to have everybody have these gadgets, you could have them connected via Li-Fi. They use it in the Soviet Union. Why they've chosen not to use it here is another discussion. Now, in terms of modernizing a school, the fact is this, that learning is a three-dimensional process, and these gadgets are no good for learning. These gadgets are a disaster for learning. The mind is designed to work on a three-dimensional basis. These are two-dimensional gadgets. Aside from the fact that the screen time creates an addiction, aside from the fact that the microwaves are known to be a known carcinogen, and aside from the fact that they're not really educational tools, but they're actually devices to enslave and dumb the kids down, I would get rid of these things. Troy High School has done fine with textbooks for decades. Troy High School has sent some of the finest minds and launched them into very high-powered careers and prominent positions in government and academia and all of these institutions without these gadgets. So I would get rid of these things. Now, you have a computer lab that was hardwired. Every single building in that school has fiber optic connectivity to the walls. So the problem is the endpoint connection to the devices, because of something called Project Inkwell, is demanded to be wireless. That's part of an agenda to irradiate people, to microwave people. It is called radiation biology. It's an offshoot of the Manhattan Project. It is still alive and well today. So, in terms of getting students to move into the 21st century, we're already in the 21st century, with or without these. Textbooks, pencils, paper are the way to educate. Chalkboards, when you physically write something with your hand, when you write something down with your hand, it does something different to your mind than typing on these keyboards. You don't have the retention when you read something on these devices that you do when you read something on paper. That's a simple fact. Then we have to deal with the issue that it does to the vision and the eyes. These are very destructive. You're going to end up with a lot of myopia, which everybody's got glasses now. Then you're going to have these detached retinas and macular degeneration in teenagers. So I think it's really good if you want to become optometrists. I mean, if you want to continue the path of mining people's health and creating industries as a result of it, I think these are great. These are garbage. They're a waste of money. They need to go. And every single one of those access points in there, the ruckus access points they put in, inside these rooms with metal walls, they're designed to power over 500 devices each. Why do we need an access point that is designed to power over 500 devices in each room with metal walls? In my opinion, they belong in prison. The people that run the school, Mr. Minster, he belongs in jail. That's my opinion for the record, ladies and gentlemen.
Actually, something that you said that textbooks are better and more beneficial to the learning and the adaptation of knowledge into students.
Yes.
Yeah. There's actually a teacher who's leading a research about how textbooks are beneficial for our specific case of students, as some of our students are more advanced than other students in other districts, and I thought that was pretty interesting. And if they find any lead to having textbooks being more beneficial to digital copies, they're gonna try and advance that agenda towards our school and being having equivalents.
Well, whoever is involved in that, I commend them, because science and fact is on their side. And the bottom line is the young minds that are impressionable and are being trained right now need to be trained in a three-dimensional fashion. And there is no comparison to how we've learned in the past compared to where we're going now. And I will tell you that most kids now can't think. The children today are being trained to be what's called a list verified. They're not being trained to critically think. They're not being trained to analyze a problem and find a solution. What they're being trained to do is look up how to deal with this. And Google has become the old man in the cave, as that old Twilight Zone movie once had, as the God and the answer to everything. You know, people need to be able to be in a situation and find a way out without having to go online and find out what the answer is. And that's unfortunately what these things do. And the rote repetition memorization is not the correct model to learn. The correct model to learn, that's the Prussian model, and that is the communist model, and that is the hive mentality creation model. That is the model that creates a population that is subservient to the state, that cannot think or act on its own. That is the problem, and that is what these schools do. Now, this school here is a magnet school, and it happens to draw in the best and the brightest, And those students are succeeding in spite of what these people are doing to them. These students are succeeding on their own merit and their own abilities in spite of the attack on their critical thinking skills.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
So there are many students in Troy High School who do not agree with your beliefs, unfortunately. Is there anything that you would like to say to those students?
Sure. Number one, I care about everybody. That's why I'm doing this. You know, dealing with this issue for as long as I have has led me to a lot of conclusions that are really plain and simple and stare you in the face. The problem with the kids, or the students, that don't want to believe what is being done to them is because they're a product of this education system where the state is sovereign, where what they say is gospel truth, where they cannot critically think to assess their own situation. There is so much information out there on how dangerous this stuff is. It's a weapon. It was created by the military. My message to these students is threefold. Number one, open your eyes and do your homework and look at the facts on this. Don't listen to what the teachers tell you. Don't listen to what the school district tells you. Look it up for yourself and study the information that's out there. Don't just take somebody's word for it because it's from some government or some wireless company's website. Look at the research. And the second thing I have to say to these students is, why would you risk your health and your fertility for these gadgets? What good is a PhD and a $5 million house in Newport Beach and a yacht and a vacation in Europe and a beautiful wife if you can't have a family? What good is it? What does it matter if you have all the money in the world and you have all the attention and status and accolades and letters after your name embossed on either a white coat or hanging on a wall somewhere? It's worthless. Life is all about having a family and having children. The third thing I would say to these students is, you cannot make this about disagreeing with Mr. Imbriano. Mr. Imbriano is not the person that has written the thousands of papers. The research has not been done by Mr. Imbriano in the laboratory setting. The fact that I have brought this to the forefront makes me nothing more than a messenger. And the mistake that these children are making is they're making it about me. And it's not about Mr. Imbriano's assertions. There are people with PhDs in pediatric neurology, professors emeritus of biochemistry, of physics, on and on it goes, that have credentials that far vastly exceed anything that I could aspire to have. They're the ones putting out the dire warnings. What is happening is the tactic being used to discredit a movement is to attack the message and ignore the message. So that's what these students need to do.
All right. So this is actually our last question. It's from someone who is actually a fan of yours. He was wondering he said, how is the Fullerton Informer website founded, and who maintains it?
Well, it's a website that I started, and I maintain it, and I run it myself. And you know what, guys? It's so easy to start a website, and it's not very expensive. But what it does require is content and effort and dedication. And you have to be dedicated to your cause, and you have to stand on solid ground with what your cause is. So it's all me, and the content is put out by myself, and it's an amalgamation of studies and political events that take place with the help of my colleagues such as Diane, Mr. Levinson, Mr. Martinez, and I have a lot of people at this point now feeding me things because they realize that is conduit to get information out.
That's all we got, actually. Yep, thank you.
That's all we have.
All right, you guys want to answer some questions?
Yeah, sure.
All right.